Is there anybody that's going to suspect this 12 to 15 passenger transit van as containing a heavily armed robbery crew, rocking 2 rifles and 2 pistols? I'm not. I'm thinking this is either a large family or some type of shuttle service. The principles and tactics being used here are not surprising, but coming from this kind of vehicle, to me that does seem to be a kind of black swan event, meaning it's rare and considered an extreme outlier. Hey guys, retired Lieutenant Todd Heaton here with Humilitas First. This is a crazy example of why you don't stop in a high crime dangerous area after dark to fill up your tank and then go inside and buy a snack. This is October 1st, 2022 at 10 p.m. Yes, it is a high crime dangerous area inside Philadelphia. The video is kind of broken up, so we get what we get, right? But the news report says that after the victim exited the store and walked back to his car, that's the point that the 4 masked men with guns jumped out of the white van and robbed the victim. Let's talk about winning principles. At about half of 1 second, we can see the victim look to the rear door of the van. The principle here is surprise. It's like a wicked jack in the box. For the victim, that's the observation stage. He sees. Now he has to process whatever it is that he's seen. At about 1 1/10 of a second, we see the victim's overall height begin to drop and his shoulders kind of shrug. That's called a flinch because of that wicked surprise. The victim, he remains in this shock and awe state until the 1.96 second mark, at which point clearly he's decided and he's begun to take action by turning and running for the perceived safety of the business. It's not going to be any kind of sanctuary for him. He's still going to get robbed of his material goods. So in less than 2 seconds, the bad guy is able to open the door, surprise, jump onto the hood, and then onto the roof, speed, and he's ready up pointing the gun at you from about 1 meter away. That's violence of action. Surprise, speed, and violence of action. That's the winning principle. This is within just about anybody's competency range, including those who haven't developed any hard skills at all, especially if he has the gun oriented at the victim's upper torso juxtaposed to his head, because the head's a smaller target. There'll be some people that are like, that's why I carry a gun. Okay, you tell me what you're going to do in this situation, because the winning principles, surprise, speed, and violence of action, were executed very efficiently in this case. You might call this sinking the ambush in deeply. Unjust criminal aggressors, robbery crews, were able to sink the ambush in very deeply, stealing time away from the innocent person of goodwill. First they steal time, then they take whatever they want, maybe including your life, had this been an assassination rather than a robbery. He's up on his target at a distance that it's actually difficult to miss, in a position where he's going to see you reaching for your waistline. Reaching for your waistline and drawing from concealment, that's a process that takes time. Do you practice it? So what's your time that you can consistently and repeatedly get that gun up the first shot? Your action of going for your gun is not going to beat his reaction of pulling the trigger in this particular situation. Action beating reaction has limits. This is most probably outside of those limits. Then it's a gamble. Does he have the will to pull the trigger? Unless he starts shooting me or some other extenuating circumstance, I'm going to comply 100% during the initial part of this violent transition. If we were to talk about resumes from a civilian perspective, meaning one civilian happened to deal with another violent civilian, who do you believe would be the best source to learn from? Would it be Special Forces guys? Did their experiences in the global war on terror include a lot of vehicle ambushes where the bad guy was 1 to 3 meters away with the Glock, with the pistol? Or was he perhaps 100 meters away with the rifle? Is this just good marketing? Is it really a good idea to lay down on the ground? What about police officers? Do they have a lot of experience dealing with a civilian as a civilian? No. Crews are not carjacking squad cars. The distinction is assassination versus threatening death to take property. Police certainly have experiences dealing with unjust criminals who lack training and for the most part only have the will to dominate so long as things go their way. They don't have the fantasy of dozens of virgins in the next life like the bad guys that our military had to face. We're talking about apples and oranges. Doesn't policing currently have a massive crisis in leadership, which of course is going to impact training? Yes, it does. So as a policeman, it's arguably better to get out of the car, regaining mobility, rather than desiring to fight from inside the coffin. But as a civilian, it might be better to fully exploit the focal shifts and the obscured views of a transition like we see here, with an officer in an unmarked car working surveillance in an alley in Louisville, Kentucky.
Police! Give me a hand! Give me a hand!
The tactics that work in a carjacking are not going to work if it's the assassination of a police officer. These are radically different circumstances. What about competitive shooting instructors? Could they be the best source for a civilian? As it relates to developing hard skills to a very high level? Yes. Tactically, it comes down to that individual's experiences in solving violent problems with force. They either have it or they don't. So can we take what's good from all of these potential sources? Yes. For at least a few years now, we have a group of guys who are pushing hard skills over and above tactics. The truth is, it takes longer to build the hard skills. And law enforcement in most places has ridiculously low shooting standards without the commitment to get better. That translates to examples of panicked shooting with mag dumps at distances the officers are not capable of shooting that fast with accuracy. It's a problem. We need both improvement in hard skills as well as sound tactics, techniques, and procedures. What we don't need are any more goofy novelties. People like new things. That's novelty. That's not helpful. We need sound tactics. Because shooting problems, bad guys, they do require a shooting solution to stop the unjust imminent threat of death. What about bad guys? Do they have a lot of hard skills? No, they have no hard skills. They don't have anybody training them. They're not going to Ben Steger's classes. They're not even going to the introductory level concealed carry courses. They don't know how to shoot two-handed with a good grip. They could not care less about the 4 firearm safety rules. The most important thing is that we come to know the principles, the underlying fundamental principles. The tactics, techniques, and procedures, they can and they do get tweaked. The bad guys, they just learn from the good guys, and vice versa. It's a violent back and forth game that we play. It's like the core tenet of all problems related to security. Go ahead, build a firewall. Guess what? The hacker is going to find a way through the firewall. Then you're going to have to build a better one. Then they're going to find a way to hack that. It's back and forth. So if the people that most frequently actually use violence out on the streets, in cities and urban areas, if those are bad guys, unjust criminal aggressors, predators, they're the ones doing all the crime. We should study how they do what they do. There's 3 ways that come to mind to how to gain experiential knowledge. 1, you do that thing. But if you become a criminal, yeah, you're going to learn, but you're going to go to prison for a long time or get killed. Both of those outcomes are bad. The second way to gain experiential knowledge is to grow up in a high crime dangerous area. You got a front row seat to these things that happen. So you see the violence unfold. You see how unfair it is. You see how people get whacked, right? But then you're limited to the number of violent encounters that you actually see. I'm going to say far superior to that is study the game film, videos of robberies and such. Guess what you're going to do? You're going to begin to see patterns. Not perfectly. There's no guarantees. You have to be able to adapt to whatever's happening in that moment. Third, and lastly, you can gain experiential knowledge from somebody who has been there and done that. The problem with that is criminals are liars. That becomes a part of who they are. That becomes a part of what they are. Liars. So you can't really trust that. You can take what they tell you and you can compare it to what you see. And when it's in accord with what you're seeing, okay, well, then it makes sense, right? It can affirm some things.
You can't let nobody get up on you.
But you can never fully trust, a gang member or any of these guys that live a life of crime.
Training, we all go through basic education as to where to hit people, where vital organs are. But there's 2 areas basically concentrated on. That's the chest area, the mid-torso, and the white lower quadrant of the abdominal area under the ribs, which is liver shot. I mean, this is massive hemorrhage either way, and that's where we try to hit people when we stab them.
I've heard it said that people that are interested in the who and the what, well, that's what sells gossip. That's like, reading the Inquirer, right? People who do a little more thinking on things, they look at the why and the how. The why is beyond the scope of this video, which is probably already too long, but it comes down to the will of men. I'm more interested in the how. So if we study the how are bad guys doing what they do? Then we can begin crafting ways to avoid those circumstances. Then we know what to look for, and perhaps more importantly, what we shouldn't waste time looking at. If you look at the animal kingdom, this is how predators do what they do. They conceal their intentions until the last possible second. First, stealing time. Surprise, speed, and violence of action. This is what works. As we study our adversary, our enemy, that helps us build a hedge against becoming their next victim, keeping ourselves and our families safe. We can do it by studying the how. Look, it's not even close. By far the best sources to learn from, to come to understand how bad guys do what they do, it's the bad guys themselves. You have to study the game film, and it helps a lot if you actually have a good amount of experience with violence. Otherwise, you're going to have some gaps.